Hello, viewers. This is Ef'n Molina, and I got...
Oh, that's right. El compadre. Hashtag gordito on the go.
And Omar, we have a legend with us.
I know. That's awesome, bro. She's really here.
I know. If you hired her, you probably would still have your house and probably have your ex-wife paying you child support.
You know what? May I never have to get another divorce? But yes, you're on the top of my list, Miss.
We are joined by the legendary Katie Klein. How are you doing, Miss Klein?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you, Ef'n.
And thank you so much for joining us. And we have Valentine's Day. And I was thinking, who would know more about love than Katie Klein?
I've had the privilege of knowing many attorneys for a long time, and they've all told me. I remember I had a good friend tell me one time, he's like, bring me a good murder case, you know? I'd rather do that than family law. Why family law?
Family law, why is it rough, or why do I do it?
Why do you do it? By far, one of the hardest laws to do.
Well, to be real frank about it, I feel like that's where the Lord put me. I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. That's the bottom line. But how I got there was that when I was a young lawyer, after I left Ewers and Toothaker, I went to the district attorney's office, and I was a felony prosecutor for a while. And then one of the old-time, very seasoned trial lawyers was sitting in the back of the courtroom one day when I was handling a motion, and he had been the father of a couple of my friends. And I said, well, hey, how are you? What you doing? He says, I came over here to talk to you because I need help. I'd like for you to join me in my practice. So I left the DA's office and went and worked with him for a year. And during the period that I was on my own, and we decided to have a seminar, and we brought in a family law specialist from Corpus Christi named Scott Cook to do some speaking for us. And he said, why are you not seeking to be a board certified family lawyer? And I said, well, because I'm not really sure I want to do family law. It's kind of gut wrenching. It's hard work. He says, yeah, but you're a fool if you don't. He said, the Valley is a place that you could do very well. It's a bird's nest on the ground because there's nobody that really practices at the high level. And people go out of town to San Antonio, Corpus, Austin, Houston looking for lawyers. And he said, you really ought to start working on family law specialization. And so I thought about it for a while and, thought about it, prayed about it, and thought, well, all right, I'll just kind of take a look at that. And Scott said, I'll help you if you get into some cases that are difficult, if you need a second opinion. And that's kind of just got encouraged to do it and started doing it.
And so how long have you been practicing family law?
It'll be 45 years, May of this year.
Wow, and you look extraordinary for practicing one of the most stressful fields of law.
Well, you're very kind. It is extremely stressful.
So with 45 years of practicing family law, surely, Ms. Klein, if someone said, how would you define love? What would you say?
I have been fortunate enough to have been married almost 30 years with a husband who was, without doubt, the best I could have ever found. And he passed away less than 3 years ago. And
I'm sorry to hear
so, no, it really was wonderful, a wonderful marriage. And I am so convinced that people that fight about stupid things are just really making a mistake. We were fortunate because we were business partners. He was a lawyer, and we were business partners before we married. So we had learned how to solve problems as business partners.
And you were married for 30 years? Wow. Oh, okay, so statistically, two lawyers getting married and just being together for 30 years. Because, lawyers, type A personalities, very, argumentative.
He was a trial lawyer, and he was a very rough and tumble kind of guy. But what we learned was early on, we made agreements about who was going to do what. And we divided up our lives into segments and made an agreement that this area was that was his. And we would communicate with each other, and we would talk about what decisions we were making. But once the decision was made, there was no going back, and there was no criticizing, there was no complaining. And it worked so well. The areas where he was strong, did he make mistakes? Sure. And he'd say, oh, I bet you're really mad at me about that. And I said, absolutely not. I made a deal with you, so it's all good.
That's awesome.
And that's how relationships should work. And because we were open and honest and negotiated how things were going to be done, we just didn't fight.
And did you ever take like the principles you learned, like practicing like family law, seeing other people's mistakes, and apply them to your marriage?
Absolutely, especially when it comes to the kind of things that people say to each other. You can learn not to say things in an offensive manner. You can learn to bring something to someone's attention without being crabby about it. And I think a lot of it's timing. If you can tell your partner, we need to talk about little Johnny's not getting himself to school or ready for school. When would you like to do that? Not just he walks in the door and he's had a bad day and like, I want to talk to you about Johnny right now. That's not the way to have productive conversation. I think that people tend to emote and they tend to react, but they tend not to think about how the discussion should be handled. And text message, don't get me started. Every conversation that's carried on in text has so many things that are not what was meant, that people glean from text. And people text because they're sometimes just don't want to call, but sometimes people want to say what they want to say, but they don't want to hear what comes back.
Yeah.
They just want to make a statement, and people get very off the track that way. I get people coming in with hundreds, literally thousands of text messages between partners, and you start reading through them like, how could you say such a thing? So I think that communication is really the most important thing, but timing of when the communication is going to take place really matters.
So Omar's single, and he's mingling. What advice can you give to people, Ms. Klein, that signals to them this is the one? This is.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I have found over time is that people have a very hard time. This may sound silly coming from an old lady, but lust is not love. And I have a feeling that a lot of people confuse the two, and that people don't understand what they're really looking for. And somebody very close to me was determined to be married to a Barbie doll, and was married to a couple of Barbie dolls that didn't work out very well. And finally I said, can you kind of like maybe make the visual impression a little less important and think about the qualities that would make you happy in a life mate? And he said, I never thought about that. I said, I know, because you're a visual person and you never get past the visual. And he eventually married a third wife that was nothing like the other two. And they have been the perfect couple, because he finally figured out what he needed to be happy and like get the visual out of the sight. That's why I think these programs, The Bachelor and The Bachelorette and stuff, they're nuts. You just marry the best looking person, you don't have no idea what you're getting. The thing is that society values the look and the appearance.
And the monetary aspect.
Well, yes, but those are superficial things that don't determine the success of a relationship. It's a matter of values. Yeah. If you don't share the same values, the relationship's not going to last.
Marry for laughs and marry for conversation. If she can keep you laughing and you can converse in the morning, that's probably a better choice.
Well, that's for some people, that's a very important thing.
Yeah.
And, there are some people that are not willing to, if you have a spouse that comes in the door and needs 25 minutes of peace and quiet, and you want to go and rag on them the minute they walk in the door, how long do you expect them to put up with that?
Yeah.
They're either going to decide, okay, I'll just take it and be resentful, or they're going to blow up, neither of which is very helpful. I find it kind of unusual that I'm going to make some enemies here, but there's a lot of stay-at-home women who think that the husband who's working should also come home and take out the trash, do the dishes, and feed the children. And that's going to be very offensive unless it's presented in a way that dad is also in agreement. And the more that you rag on somebody to do something they don't want to do, the worse it's going to get. And we've seen a lot over the last few years of people getting involved in relationships, a lot of them for money. Professional sex type workers. And they get weirder and kinkier, and it's like things that I've not even considered in my lifetime.
So Ms. Klein, what type of trends are you seeing in certain professions where you're like, maybe you should think twice about dating this person that has a certain profession?
Well, people that marry dentists have a very rough time. Wow. And people don't know that, but it's because dentists are so used to having everything perfect and clean and needing to wipe out anything dirty. They tend to be obsessive compulsive by nature. And if you have a spouse of a person who's obsessive compulsive and you don't know how to deal with that, it's very, very hard. People that are rigid and obsessive compulsive are not people that are easy to solve problems with. Mm-hmm. Now I've just made probably an enemy of a bunch of dentists, but
the dental association.
Yeah, we have everybody calling right now. The lines are
dentists
going
do have high rates of divorce and suicide.
Out of curiosity, lowest divorce rate, like from profession wise, what do you see here?
Statistically, I don't know the answer to that, but
your experience.
I have found in my experience that people that go to a regular job and work in a regular job where both parents are working and have equal expectations for each other can make very good relationships.
Yeah.
It's not true that one parent staying home and the other one being out of the house is necessarily a good
family unit.
Now, it is great if you have one of the parents at least who can control their work environment to where if a child is sick or whatever, it's not a big imposition on the family. But it does seem to me that, in some respects, the more money that the professional is making, sometimes there are people that find that to be very threatening in a strange sort of way. Like, oh, well, this person thinks that she's going to make all the decisions because she makes the money. And in our society, men are raised to believe that they need to be the superior breadwinner. And there are a lot of men that cannot deal well with women who are successful. There are some women that do very, very well, and some men that are very proud to be married to someone who does. But a lot of men cannot be a partner to a woman who makes more money than they do. And that's a sad thing.
It takes a very strong man. I mean, when my wife was making more money than me, it took me a while to just sit back and tell yourself, okay, you're going to fulfill that trophy husband stereotype.
I'm glad that your OnlyFans page took off though. And you started making more money.
But
I found out about OnlyFans through a lawsuit too.
But it did take some work because society and the way you grow up just instills in you. You're the man. You got to make more money.
Absolutely, because money is equated with self-worth. That money is a representation of your success as a human being, when that's kind of not an appropriate yardstick. Yeah, it's not an appropriate yardstick. Another thing is that you have to be mindful of the fact that there are people that are struggling with eating disorders on the other side. Anorexia and other eating disorders can really take a toll on relationships.
Society's so hard on people now, like the way the social media.
Women in general. You have
men and women.
The Kardashians, who are the, I guess, pinnacle of beauty right now. It's a hard.
I'm a fan of a good gordita, but that's another story.
Well, the whole thing about having to have a big butt, has gotten to be so amazing. The number of people that are going in and
The Brazilian
having
butt
fat
lifts.
transfers and reshaping their rear ends or buying pads to go on their butts to make them look bigger. I mean, it used to be you didn't want to see that, but people's trends do change.
The lip thing trips
Oh
me
my
out.
gosh.
I wonder what's going to happen, like when the aliens land one day and they're like excavating. They're like, what were these people doing? They got
Yeah,
plastic
there
in
are a
there.
lot of
And one of the things that I've seen, Miss Klein, that really disturbs me. I mean, like, I don't do family law, but when I'm sitting there and I'm watching the family law cases called, the one thing that I just can't wrap my head around is that two people fell in love, they then had children, and then they start using the children as like leverage within the case.
It's like a bargaining chip.
It's very, very sad. It's very, very disturbing. And it's amazing, too. If you read statistical studies and you read psychological articles about children, you will find that children who have been studied, there was a longitudinal study done out of California, and they took children who had been in divorce and then how they felt at the time and then years later. And universally, the children want to know, why did their parents get divorced?
Sure.
That's the one thing they want to know, is why. And sadly, that's the one thing they shouldn't know, because they don't need to have bad information about either parent.
Sure.
But they feel very unsatisfied that they don't know why this is happening to them. And the answer to the question is really tough. But I have actually had children that are bugging their parents, like, well, why did dad leave? Well, why did mom leave? Well, mom and dad are not going to tell you the same thing, because they have two different perspectives. There is no ultimate why. Why did it happen? You'll hear people say, oh, well, mom had a boyfriend. Well, why did mom have a boyfriend? What failed in the relationship that caused mom to go out of the marriage? Or what caused dad to go looking for paid sex someplace? And sometimes it is a personality issue that somebody really needs therapy. Sometimes it's a failure of the relationship. And you're going to tell a 6-year-old, well, dad likes hookers better than mom? No, you're not going to do that. And so it's very hard. And I try to tell my clients to tell their children, it's not good for you to be worrying about that. It's, we all need to marshal our energies to be the most productive families that we can be in 2 areas, in 2 houses, and not worry about how we got here. I always like to use the analogy of your vehicle. I tell people, you have a very tiny rearview mirror. You have a very large windshield, and you ought to spend your time in proportion to your windshield. That much looking forward and this much looking back, because looking backwards does not help.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Wow. And Ms. Klein, I mean, you've been doing family law a very long time, and do you think things are getting kind of crazier? I mean, things have changed so much. I mean, now you have, at one time, if you were gay, you couldn't get married. Now you can.
Yes, you can.
And I've also been seeing now there's you used to have couples. Now what are they called? Thruples, where it's 3 people entering a relationship.
Not a good idea.
So it is just, things are changing so fast. What type
I
of
sound
trends are
very
you seeing?
conservative when I say this, but I really think that some of our more traditional values serve families better than let's experiment with something new. We don't know how it's going to work. I really, now, as far as gay relationships are concerned, there are many, 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 many happy people. And I know people that have been together 30, 40 years that were not married because they didn't have that as an option. Some of them are choosing to marry later in life. Some of them are saying, well, we've been together 30 years, so what's the point? But gay divorces are presenting very different issues for people, not because the property issues are any different, but because the feelings about the 2 people that got together felt like it's us against the world. They really felt very bonded. And then when it doesn't work, There's a lot of hardship and a whole lot of heartache that goes with that. And then you deal with it. What about children? There is an anomaly in the law that in reality, only one of the parents is going to be a biological parent. And so
One of them has rights, one of them doesn't. That's interesting.
And so the other parent who generally comes in and adopts the child, they legally have the same rights, but it seems that there's a tendency for the judges to favor the biological parent over the non-biological parent, even though they legally might have the same rights. And that's a big heart. Not even unexpected anymore to have somebody walk into your office that's got 3 children. They had 3 different mothers or 3 different fathers or step parents. I mean,
do you think divorce still has the stigma it used to have? Because now it seems like a divorce is kind of just like a bad breakup. It's like, yeah.
I think that people have tried to minimize the emotional baggage that comes with divorce, almost to the point that I think people don't give enough respect to the difficulty that you feel. It's a very sad situation, and an awful lot of people are very, very damaged by divorce.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think that people think, oh, well, we broke up. I can bounce back. And it's not really like that. I think that people want to give lip service to the fact that divorce is no big deal. I do not believe that it is no big deal. I really think that it's still a very hurtful time in people's lives, and they need to give respect to that.
And the other thing that I've been seeing, and you mentioned it, that your parents were high school sweethearts.
That's
right?
cool.
That is extremely rare now.
It is.
Where are you seeing? At what point in life are you seeing where most people are meeting their partner?
A lot of people, like, here in the Rio Grande Valley, you may just run into somebody casually at church or the grocery store or at a party or whatever. But the trend toward finding mates online is becoming, in my view, even more and more pronounced. And I was sort of late to come to the party about thinking that might be an option, because people lie online. They'll say whatever they think you're looking for, but they're not really being honest. I have seen exceptions, though, and I actually have a son who is married to a lady that he had an online relationship with for quite some time. But most of the online relationships that result in people getting married very quickly, they don't seem to last very long, because you don't really get to know someone online. You get to know their script, but you don't get to know the person.
If you had to give someone advice, like, I'm going to take this person out on a first date, what advice would you give them, Ms. Klein? Where would be the best place?
I have seen a lot of people go out for coffee.
Wow.
Go out for coffee or go bowling or go someplace where you're going to be talking. That's really what you need to do, is you really need to talk and learn what this person's about and what they value. And people like, oh, let's go to the movies. Well,
that's a horrible place to go for a first date.
Well, sure, because you don't talk to each other, you don't learn anything. And so I think any place where you're encouraged to talk is a good place to go.
As I've dated, dating at 40 is a nightmare. I do stand-up comedy. Let me tell you, don't come to my show. It's horrible. Plenty of fish. They should call it plenty of filth. Anyway, but for real, it isn't every individual, every lady and their experience that they've been through. It makes you approach it differently, because some women, they want to go out 50-50 with you. Like, they'll literally sit down and be like, no, I'll take care of Meg. And it's like, it's kind of weird to me.
On the first date, who should pay?
The person that asks.
That's
fair.
That's fair. That's an easy way to resolve it.
Yeah.
That's
classy. That's like el que invita paga. Like, that's it. Like, hey,
yeah, that's the easiest way to resolve it. Wow.
Hey, you guys, why not? Let's go.
Well, because think about it. The person who asks already has a mindset of how much I can afford to pay. Where do I want to go? They've been thinking about it. So let them present
do that,
their
yeah.
proposal. I mean, that's basically what it is. And I don't think that you should have an argument about it. But that's just me. I just think the person who asks should expect to pay. Now, if the other person wants to contribute, don't be a jerk about it.
Yeah, of course. But
But
it's interesting how some people approach that. It really, really is. It almost makes it feel like, why are you even going out on this date? Like,
But that's symptomatic of the fact that money drives a lot of arguments among people. Money is a great joy to have, but money is a big source of consternation between people because it has a lot of meaning independent of just paying for something.
Do you have separate accounts or joint accounts?
Or both.
Or both.
there's some accounts that are separate, some accounts that are joint. I like that.
I have found that a lot of people benefit from you have your money, I have my money, and we have a household account. And we decide how much money needs to be in that household account, and we can both put money in the household account. Now, in a lot of relationships, it's, you put your money in an account, I'll put my money in an account. And if I need some of yours, I'll tell you. And if you need some of mine, or they can put the joint money in savings. Like you can have your money, I'll have mine, and we each agree that we're going to put X number of dollars into a savings account every month, and what you do with the rest of it is your business. So there's a lot of ways to do it so long as you talk about it and people are not being either unkind, unfair, or dishonest.
Yeah. I see a lot of these like honeymoon relationships where they're going to tropical places, vacationing, doing all of the good stuff. And I think you really don't know if that person's right for you until you go through the bad stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole expression may or may not have relevance here, but about, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I do believe that going through difficult times is what really bonds people together. Sadly, like a loss of a child, very few people can survive that. So there's a kind of limit to that. But until you've had to struggle with making a budget, paying your bills, going to the school when the kid gets in trouble, all of those things really can help you discern if you have what it takes to make it for the long haul. And honestly, I have seen so many couples that say, oh, well, we didn't really like each other from years 7 through 10, and then we kind of found each other again.
Have you ever hooked like people up?
You mean like
say,
a matchmaker?
Yeah, like a matchmaker.
Fiddler on the Roof style.
Not through the practice, but I have made my opinion known a few times.
That's good.
That's good. That's good.
And, it was funny. There were three of us, Marlene Myers, Susan Williams, and I were the three that were the kind of senior lawyers who did family law. And Marlene and Sue once said, the three of us ought to get together and we ought to form a business where we can pass on whether or not somebody's good marriage material, because we've seen it all.
That's real.
That is, if you are looking for investors, let me know. That is a $1 million idea.
I thought it was kind of interesting because they were both like, well, we can spot him a mile off.
You're like, this is not going to work. You're like, no, but we love each other. No, you don't.
Okay, well,
not a good bet.
What are some of the dead like giveaways that you see someone like, oh, that's not a good match?
Impatience. If a person has no patience, that's a very bad recipe for trying to put a life together, especially if you want to have children. And inflexibility, if you can't roll with the punches, you're not going to be able to deal with people, because people, they're not the same every day. People have good days and bad days, and you have to be willing to be flexible and patient. And the ones that want to control from morning till night, that's a very dangerous thing. I mean, people, that's another buzzword that people love to use. Oh, he's a controlling person or she's a controlling person. But the idea that people are not free to make any decisions for themselves, that's trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to
thank
have
you
those.
so much for joining us and just imparting this knowledge on you. I mean, I came away with stuff that I was like, wow.
You're a
you know,
beautiful
this-
soul. It was good, it was good sharing
Always-
conversation.
Not what everybody would tell you, though, because I am a very determined trial lawyer and I take my work very seriously. And that's the one thing I think that is so odd is that people think that who you are as a lawyer is who you are as a human being. And sometimes they're not the same.